Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of this Woodland diorama tutorial. So in yesterday's part we made the base for the woodland floor, so we've got this kind of earthy, mossy base for our diorama, and I also made the head for our woodland imp or fairy, whichever you want to call her. So today we're going to start making her body, so I'm going to move our tin out of the way. And I'm going to bring in some floristry wire, and I believe this is about 22 gauge, this floristry wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this in half, and I'm just going to cut it down the middle. So I'm going to take some just ordinary wire cutters and snip it in half. And then I'm going to take one of the halves and I'm going to fold that in half. And then I'm just going to do a tiny twist, but nothing too big. So 1, 2, that's enough. We don't want any more than that, okay? In fact, that's potentially a little bit too long, but for the moment it's okay. So I've got probably about 1 centimetre's worth of twist in there. I'm then going to fold the second piece in half, and then I'm going to place that over what will be the neck of our imp. And this is basically like when I do my mice armatures, but with the slight difference that obviously we're not adding a tail or anything like that, and we're just making the limbs different sizes to obviously work with the more human form. So once this is placed over the front, I'm then going to twist these together. So 1, 2, it's a bit early in the morning, so my dexterity isn't as great as it could be. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the same on the other side. So I'm folding this one over the top of this one. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So once I've got these two areas here twisted, which are going to form her shoulders, I'm going to pull these two back, and I'm going to fold one over the other to make a triangular shape here. I want it to be probably about there. And then I'm going to twist these together, 2, I think that's probably enough. And then I'm going to have her arms coming down here. Okay, so we've got this kind of human type shape. What I'm then going to do is I'm just going to trim the arms just a little bit. So I'm just taking the ends off there, just match them up and make sure that they're roughly the same length. There. Oh, that flew off somewhere. That hit the radiator. A bit more, I think. There we go. I can never seem to snip wire without it flying off in a different direction for some reason, so it's always best to be out of the room when I'm doing this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just fold these over so we don't have any sharp ends. So fold over the legs first. 1, and then this one. And just making sure and checking that they are roughly the same length. Yeah, that's good. And then the same with the arms. It's quite stiff, but you could always use a pair of pliers if you're struggling to use the strength of your fingers to kind of pull the wire ends up. Okay, so you should have something that looks a bit like this. For anybody that's following along, the measurements for this are, the arm is just under 2 inches. The legs are 1.5 inches. The torso from the shoulder down to just where the legs start is 1.5 inches. And then the neck is just under 1/2 inch. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is take some of my felting wax, and I'm just going to rub this all over the body of my fairy imp. This is just going to help us with the wool and make sure that it sticks nicely without any slip, you see. And then I'm going to go back to my pink merino wool. And this process is very gradual. We're going to start wrapping the body, but we're not wanting to use lots and lots of wool. We just want to use a very tiny amount. So I'm just going to pull some strips of this pink merino wool bats off. This is the same wool that we used for her head at the beginning of the tutorial in part 1. So just a few strips to get me started. Okay. And I'm also going to just take a little bit of my wax onto my nail as well, just to help me with getting this to stick to the armature. I'm just going to rub it between my fingers. And you'll find it's got a nice stickiness to it. And I also sell this felting wax in my shop, and it just really makes life a lot easier when you're wrapping armature. because it has the stick to it, it just means that your wool doesn't slip and it helps it stay in place. So what I'm doing here is I'm just wrapping the wool around the armature. I'm holding with my left hand really tightly the end so it doesn't unravel, and then with my right hand I'm wrapping and just moving my left hand down as I go until I get all the way down to where the hand is. I'm going to go past the hand and then I'm going to come back up. We're not going to be doing fingers in this tutorial, okay? So we're going to be keeping this, like I said at the beginning, we're going to be keeping this quite straightforward. So nothing too difficult at the moment. We're just going to be giving her kind of the impression of a hand, but nothing too detailed. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and then once I get to the top, I'm just going to do a few more turns, down, and then back up. And then once I'm back up, I'm just going to felt that down. Go. Okay, so not loads of felting, just a touch, just to tack it into place. Okay, this end piece here, I'm just going to wrap it around the neck area, like so. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the second arm. So now we've got our arms roughly wrapped, I'm going to start wrapping our legs. So I'm just going to pull her legs apart slightly and then place this piece of wool in between her legs and then just pull it off to one side so it's locked, anchored into position, and then wrap it in the same way that we just wrapped the arms. Again, just taking some wax in my fingers, and as I'm wrapping the wool, the wax between my thumb and my finger, I'm just pressing against the wool so it helps the wool to lock into position. Once again, I'm going past the end of the wire all the way back up to the top. And then back down again, and then back to the top. And then the same on the other side. So now I've wrapped the legs and the arms, and we've started wrapping the neck a bit just by default because of the extra fibre we had left over from the arms. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap the torso. So I'm going to take some more of my pink merino wool bats. I've got some of my wax between my thumb and my finger, and we're going to hold this like we do with the mouse armatures, if you've ever watched any of my mouse tutorials, under the body. And then I'm just going to bring it round and then just in between the legs, and I'm going to hold it really tightly, okay? I'm then going to hold this very close and I'm going to twist this. I'm just going to move her arms out of the way a sec. Up the body. Up past this triangle. Like so. And then I'm going to go over the shoulder that's furthest away from me, wrap it round again, and then as I get to the back area I'm going to bring this down and then wrap it round again. Okay, so we're creating a bit more bulk around the shoulder area. I'm then just going to bring it a bit tighter, over again, tease that out a bit, back around the torso and then back over the shoulder nearest to me again, and then back around the torso, keeping it nice and tight. And then I'm going to hold it down with my nail, that loose end there, felt it down, and just felt that into position like so. Okay, I've got this loose end here, so I'm just going to bring that around the legs until I've got a tiny amount, and then just felt that into the legs. There we go, so we've got the start of a torso here, but it's looking a bit lumpy, so I'm just going to go to my needles and I'm just going to push downwards on an angle just to get this a bit smoother and a bit less lumpy. And then the same on the other side. There we go, so we've got what's looking a little bit more like a body now. So what I want to do next is I want to concentrate on adding a bit more volume and bulk around the waist and the hip area for our imp, because we want her to have quite a natural looking form. So I'm going to go back to my wall. I'm going to take another piece of that wool bat. So I'm going to start off by holding this under the body and just onto her chest. I'm not going to use any wax because we don't need any now, because we've already got this base that we've created here by wrapping that first initial bit of wool around the wire. And now it'll start getting easier in terms of felting because the wire isn't quite as close to our needles when we start felting, you see. And I'm going to just start wrapping around the torso. So I'm going under the legs and then just back around the waist, just to kind of create more of a hip area for her. And this is a very gradual process. You don't want to rush this process because we're forming the shape of our body. We don't want to add too much wool in because it'll then take away from the waif-like appearance that we're trying to create for our elf slash pixie, or imp slash pixie. Oh my god, she's been all sorts of things in this in these videos. She's been a fairy, she's been an imp, she's been an elf, she's been a half-foot, although her feet are too small to be half-foots. For those of you who don't know what a half-foot is, it's on the Rings of Power. I think it's kind of like the precursor to a Hobbit. It's classic. It's a classic Tolkien series because each episode lasts about 10 hours. It is very good though. So I'm just going to felt some of this into her back area, some of these loose fibres. I'm just going to flip her over and again just felt around that torso. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needles and I'm going to use them one under the other, and I'm just going to felt in between her legs just to felt down that wool a bit more, give a bit more length to her legs. Because what you'll find is as you're adding more wool, you're creating more bulk around everywhere, and you lose some of the length of things where the wire is, if that makes sense. It's very early, so sometimes I'm not sure if I make much sense in these tutorials. I hope I do. There we go. Okay, so I think I'm just going to add a little bit more wool around the lower part, around her hips. Again, just because I just want a bit more bulk there. I don't want too much, but just enough just to give her more of a hippie area. So I'm just going to felt that initial piece down now into her torso. Now we've got something to felt into. And I'm going to just fold around one leg, bring it up, around the waist, around the second leg, bring it up. So we're kind of adding more to the thigh area as well. Okay, that's good. And then I'm just going to felt that down. Just felt between her legs again. And then also just around that waist area. And I'm just using my needles on an angle here just to felt down into the waist to create more shaping for her torso. Oops. And just remember to turn her over as well and felt the back area too. So you've got a nice even felt all over the body. So I think for the time being, I'm not going to add any more wool to the torso, but I do want to add a little bit more wool to her arms and her legs. So I'm going to go back to that pink merino. I'm going to take a very thin piece this time, but just go with what you feel is right. Don't feel like you have to copy me. Just go with what you think is enough wool for your imp slash pixie slash fairy. So I'm just going to go to the second leg now, and I'm just going to wrap, again, a little bit more wool around this one. So I'm just going to felt it down initially into the torso, those loose fibres, and then with the rest of the fibres I'm just going to felt them around the body, and then I'm just going to felt that down. So there we go, I've added the second layer of merino wool bats to the two legs, so they're starting to look a little bit more realistic now. However, I have noticed that they are probably a little bit short. But I'm not too worried about this because later on we're going to add a dress to her, so you're not actually going to see the length of the legs. And also, in addition to that, our tin is quite small and I don't want her to obviously be too big to go inside of the tin. So all is not lost. I'm not worried about that, and quite often that can happen when you're doing things by eye and needle felting. And that's the joy of any art form, isn't it? You sort of learn as you go what works, what doesn't work. And I'm kind of going by the fly here in order to make sure that she fits in the tin. But like I said, it's not a problem because she's going to be wearing a dress anyway, so it's not a big issue. So what I want to do is just add a bit more wool to her arms, but only a very, very small amount. So I'm going to grab a bit more wool. And I really want to concentrate on the kind of the first 2/3 of the arm. I'm not too worried about her hands here. So I'm just going to lock this into place on her torso. I'm just going to fold that round. I'm just going to go down that centre part a little bit, just because it is quite thin there, just to give it a bit more bulk. And then I'm just going to come back up and concentrate more on the shoulder area and the top of the arm. And then just felt the end fibres down. And then I'm just going to add a bit more wool again to the second arm and do exactly the same thing. Right, so I've added a bit more bulk to the arms, so I'm going to go and add a little bit more bulk now, just to the chest, just so it's not as flat. So I'm just going to take some pieces of that pink merino and I'm just going to tear it and then place it on top of one another. So I've got some layers of wool. I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm just going to place it over her chest, under her neck area, and just felt that down. Just so that any clothing that we add to her falls and looks natural, like it's falling onto a regular body with the sort of the curve and shape of what a regular body would have. So there we go, so we've got a bit more bulk around the chest area now, just to make it look a bit more natural. And then finally, I'm going to add a little bit of additional wool just around her neck. And I'm actually just going to felt those first initial fibres again into her chest, just to add to that bulk again. And then once that's locked down, I'm just going to do a few turns into her neck, holding it nice and taut. Just so I've got something to work with in a moment when we come to attach the head. So that's probably, let's go for a few turns at the lower base. That's about right there. So I'm just going to felt that down, and it's really key here that you get that as tight as possible. I'm just going to felt this down into our chest and shoulder area. Get a nice long symmetrical neck shape here. So I'm just going to felt very gently into the top of the head where I've got that additional bulk, being careful because obviously you've got the wire there, but just to felt that a bit more, you can hear the wires jiggling around there. And then I'm just going to again felt around the base of the neck, just so it integrates a bit more in with the rest of the body. And you want this to be nice and solid, purely because of the next thing that we're going to do. Right, so we've got our neck in place, and at the moment she does look a little bit like an alien. She looks a bit strange. She looks like she's got this very tiny head, but obviously her head is over here, what we made yesterday. So what we want to be able to do is attach our head to the neck of the body that we've created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my head and my neck and I'm just going to position it roughly where I think this is going to look the best. So probably about here looks good. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over so it's about there in the back of her head. So I'm just going to move my torso out the way. I'm just going to take my needles and I'm just going to felt a little divot into the back of our head that we made. Because this is going to house our neck. So we want it to be relatively deep in order for the head to sit naturally on the body. So this can take a while, but just be patient. And you want to keep felting until you get to, looks like this. So it's quite deep and I can easily get the tip of my little finger in there. So it's a nice deep hole for our neck to sit. So the next thing to do is to take our torso, make sure it's the right way around because we don't want her with her face facing on her bottom. That would be very unfortunate. So I'm just going to place her head in position here and I'm going to go to one of my doll needles. So I'm going to take one of my doll needles and I'm going to take some polyamide thread. Hopefully you can see that on the camera because the lighting's not great. I'm just going to feed that through the eye of my needle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle up through the chest and base of the neck, up through the neck, and then up through the hole that we've made and then up through the top of the head of our fairy. Okay, like so. Looks like a bit of a scary procedure for her, but she's under anaesthetic. It looks like a bit of a scary procedure for her, but she's under anaesthetic. She feels nothing. I'm just going to tie a knot. Go, and then just cut away the excess. And then I'm just going to rethread my needle and I'm going to take it back through the head, back through the hole we made, and then back through the neck. Hopefully not stab myself. There we go. Just feed that through. And then come back through again and then come back through the neck again up through the head, pull that through. And then once I've sewn my head on with my polyamide thread, I'm just going to tie a knot as close as I can to the body so there isn't too much give. And then once that knot's in place, I'm just going to trim it. So there we go. So we've made our body and our head is attached to our body. So if I just bring in the hair again so you can get an idea of what she's going to look like when she's complete. So that's the hair I'm going to use. So you can see she's really starting to take form now and look a lot more imp-like. And then I'm just going to check her against the tin as well. Oh, look at that. Perfect. And then we can have her on her side then as well. And the nice thing is, because we've got that wire armature in place, we can maneuver her into different positions so she looks like she's asleep like that. So I'm very happy with that so far. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be adding her clothing and her hair, and then we're going to be eventually adding more elements to our scene to really bring it to life. So I will see you tomorrow in part 3. Have a wonderful day. Bye.